Chapter 13. The Sprouts declared a day off as soon as vacation began. I stayed in bed as long as I could, finished my library book in the mulberry tree, and clamped on my roller skates. Skating was as close as I could come to flying. I spread my arms for wings and pretended I was soaring over some foreign country, winning the war with Jeff. We had women pilots, I knew, called WASPs, for Women Air Force Service Pilots. They were important to the war and to Jeff. They delivered the B 24s to the pilots overseas, but they couldn't go into battle. I didn't see why not. I banked to the right and was abruptly grounded. A wheel came whirling off my skate, and I crash landed right in Mrs. Burt's petunias. Except for smashed blossoms and one skinned elbow, it was a non injury crash. I found the wheel and put it in my pocket, took off the skates and buckled the ankle straps together, then slung them over my shoulder. As long as I was there, I'd inspect Mr. Burtz's garden, day off or not. I bent to finger a green tomato, round and hard still, but now as big as a shooting marble. It would swell to full size, ripe and juicy in a matter of weeks. Water made that happen. The plant was a pump, Mr. Burt had once told us. It pulled water up from the ground and into the tomatoes. I dug my fingers into the dirt around the plants. It was still damp. No need to water that day. The tomatoes might be small, but the peppers were bigger than my fist. The beans and pea pods as long as my hand. I flung my arms out and twirled around, skates knocking my chest and back. It's working, I whispered into the air. The garden is working. I headed for home and my stationery drawer. I couldn't wait to tell Jeff. By Saturday, it seemed as if school had been out forever, not just 3 days. I was getting the willies. Would the Sprouts remember to come now that it was summer? Maybe I had rushed into this, gone off on my own one too many times, but I'd had to, hadn't I? To keep the garden from being plowed under? In spite of our lavish school picnic in Shady Grove, food was growing more scarce across America. I had cut a page from life and saved it for the young Sprouts. Listen to this, I would say to them. Farm and food crisis. This year, the United States must produce more food than ever before. The picture showed an old grandfather and two little boys helping out on a farm. If they could do it, we could do it. I folded the page and put it in my pocket. I laughed when Andy, of all people, showed up first. Hey, lazy bones, he called through the screen door. He should talk, but I grinned, seeing his freckled face. They all came, as bored already with summer as I was. We got the hose and trowels from behind my house and headed across the street. It felt right to be together again. I watched the other kids as I worked. Some were fast and some were slow, but everybody did something. Not bad. The talk turned to the end of school and Billy Riggs's fights. I heard a teacher say if they could keep Billy's hands tied behind him, he wouldn't be so much trouble, said Maria. My dad said old man Riggs is a drunk, said Andy. Said Billy won't amount to much. Your dad told you that? Said Ellie. Told my mom, but I heard him. Told me if I fight him, don't whine about a bloody nose. He rubbed his nose as he said it. He can't help who his father is, I said, scratching the ground with my hoe. Billy could have a good side, too. That brought a burst of protests. Who says? I've never seen a good side. I don't want to see any side. I hope he doesn't show up here again. I wanted to agree, but I couldn't. I told them, finally, about Billy and Old Wolf, how Billy had stayed with the dog and tried to help him. Look, Billy doesn't even like Mr. Burt, but he took care of the Burt's dog as if it was his own, I said. That's his good side. I've seen it. The others fell silent. I don't care, said Allie in a quiet voice. I hope he stays away from here. In a way, I hope so too. I hadn't told them everything I knew or thought I knew about Billy Riggs. The air was sticky, and our shirts clung to our backs. When the noon whistle called the town to its midday break, we took long drinks from the hose and squirted cold water on each other, squilling. We sprawled in the shade and attacked our sack lunches. While we ate, mostly from each other's sacks, we guessed at the money we could make. A bundle, said Andy, chomping on a carrot. He pointed the carrot at the garden. Soon be loads of stuff to pick. But the money isn't really ours, is it? Said Maria. I mean, except for savings stamps. Sure it is, if we earn it, said Andy. Nobody said we had to spend everything on stamps. But didn't we say it was for stamps? They all looked at me. What exactly did Mr. Burt say? I smiled. All he said was that we had to win the Chronicles' Great Tomato Duel. Yay! They cheered. I wasn't sure whether it was for the tomatoes or the money. Poor Louise. Bet she's sorry she quit, said Allie. Did you see her face when all the kids came up to us after we got our names in the paper? Rich had been quiet. Speaking of quitting, you wouldn't. We're just getting started. I have to. My granddad's taken sick. They need me at the farm. I folded my arms and gripped my own elbows. Rich did know his gardening. He didn't think of it as work, even though he'd said it was a long way from planting to picking. He saw my panic. You'll be fine, he said. Granddad says nature does most of it, so don't go crazy. Andy was watching a ladybug on his finger. Sorry about your granddad, he said, breaking a nervous silence. He stuck the ladybug under Ellie's nose. Get that out of here. Andy, cut it out, said Scott. He held Andy's wrist and moved it away from Ellie's face. We better talk about how we're going to make all this money. Easy, said Andy. Pick, sell, before the stuff rots. How do we know people will want it? Said Scott. I had done plenty of worrying about that. With food ripening in victory gardens all over the town, who would need ours? But I argued for the bright side. They'll need extra for canning. Scott persisted. Don't forget the competition. You think too much, Scott, said Andy. What competition? From the farmers. They'll soon be bringing vegetables to town to trade, along with their eggs and milk. I thought farm crops went overseas, said Allie. The wheat, yes, but the vegetables that go over there come from huge commercial farms, not from the farms around here. When our farms have extra produce, they bring it to town to sell every Saturday. So we beat them to it. Pick on Fridays, sell to the folks in town and carry it right to their doors. Save them walking to the store, said Andy. Why not just sell ours to the stores? Said Maria. They could buy from us like they do from the farmers. Not likely, said Scott. The farmers trade for other groceries. We want cash. We should run ads in the Chronicle, said Andy. Now who's thinking too much? Ads cost money, said Ellie. Not much if we keep it short, said Scott. My mom ran an ad to sell a rocker. They charge 3 cents a word. Who has a pencil? Me. Andy fished a stub out of a pocket full of junk. We bickered over wording. Scott flattened his lunch sack and scribbled on it, scratched out and scribbled more. Finally, he read back. Young Sprouts gardeners will be selling their vegetables door to door every Friday. Look for us. He counted the words, then turned the sack over and worked the math on the back of the sack. 48 cents. Ouch. Take out will be. And there. Still too long. We don't need gardeners and vegetables both. Or every. Let's assume they'll look for us. Young Sprouts gardeners selling door to door Fridays. 24 cents. There'll be 5 of us without Rich, a nickel apiece, and we draw straws to keep the extra penny. I watched their faces, except for Louise Lang. Kids didn't have nickels jingling in their pockets. A nickel would buy an ice cream cone, double dip, or 5 BB bat suckers from Rexall Drugs. Come Harvest Festival, the nickel would get you a ride on the Ferris wheel. I crossed my fingers for luck. Let's see if we can charge the first ad and pay for it out of our first sales. I have to get home, said Ellie. Are we done? Done. Andy gathered the top of his lunch sack, blew into the narrow opening, twisted it shut, and popped it with his fist. When I explained the plan to Dad later, he nodded. You keep the Marks Bootery accounts, Mother, he said. Can we underwrite the first ad? That way the Sprouts won't start out in debt. Mother smiled. I'll check the books, she said. I hadn't mentioned Billy, but he was on my mind. What if he showed up to bother us again or trampled the garden? He must have been on Mother's mind too. Where's your friend Billy? She said. He hasn't come back to see old Wolf. He's not exactly my friend, Mother. Everybody hates him. Do you? How can I after what he did for Wolfie? I told the kids, but they don't want him around. I hunched my shoulders. What can I do? Dad was the one who answered. The boy may have a lot to overcome, but he's earned your respect. One day he may just earn theirs too. I doubted that. All I know is nobody's even seen him since the picnic, and nobody wants to.